Hello my lovelies and welcome to today's video. My name's Alya and I'm so glad you stopped by. Today we're talking about my corneal scratch. Yes, and I didn't even do it to myself, but it was entirely my fault. So stick around and find out how on earth that happened. You know, I honestly never thought that I would be telling you this story. Not because it's so outlandish to have a corneal scratch. It's not. It's rather common actually. Most people don't even know that that's what they've done, or that's what's happened, I should say. But in my case, I knew exactly what it was, and I knew exactly how it happened and everything like that. So, but I never thought that, you know, that would be a video topic. But I have to share. I have to share, as always, all the experiences in clinic, and I guess this was one too. It was actually really interesting. So long story short, I have a wonderful new staff member doing some training, and she had never ever used a tool, one of our main measuring devices, something that I use on almost every single patient that comes through the door will have this particular measurement done. It's a glaucoma screening tool. It's also a glaucoma treatment tool in many ways. It measures the pressure of the eye extremely accurately. It's one of the most reliable things that we have clinically. It's a wonderful little machine. It's referred to as the Perkins. That's the sort of brand, if you like, that is most commonly known. And yeah, we've got our own version of that, and it's really good. I mean, I've loved it for, you know, it's quite a few years old. It's had a few different bits and pieces replaced on it. It's just one of those things that you can always go to, always rely on, and it will always be accurate. And yeah, so I thought it was really important that she needs to know this tool, because most places these days don't use it anymore. Not no places, but a lot of places don't use it anymore. They've opted for something that doesn't require anesthetic drops, something that relies far less on the skill of the operator. This is, I would say, somewhat skilled, this tool, and her teaching her how to use it proved that again. I haven't taught anyone how to use this tool for many years, because it just hasn't ever come up that somebody doesn't already know how to use it. And I myself had to learn it the hard way in my time. I did a stint with a glaucoma specialist when I was, I don't know, probably my first week working, and that's all I used. It's all they had, and I got really good at it. You know, just practice. Prior to using the Perkins, I was using a machine called the Goldman. Now, Goldmans are the same thing. It's the same technology. It's the same measuring technique. It's all the same, except that it's on a stand. So if you go to an eye specialist, they get you to put a chin on a thing and they shine a bright light into your eye, and one of those lights is blue. That blue light is called the Goldman technique. So it comes with a special prism head and all that sort of stuff. That same thing, it comes in a little handheld operator, and that is what I use. That's the Perkins. And so I'm teaching her how to use this thing, and this is a device that uses a very specific prism head. So it's a literal triangular prism head. I'll try and find an image for you guys, and with a flat surface at the end. And inside that prism head are a set of Myers. So literally two semicircles. They get illuminated with the blue light, and when you apply the Perkins to the eye, you match up the pressure of the prism head in millimeters of mercury versus the pressure that is inside the eye, and you get a reading of how much pressure is in that really front area of the eye, the anterior chamber. It's all we're really after, because that's what's going to determine glaucoma. Now, if you press too hard or you don't press hard enough, first of all, you won't get a good reading. Second of all, you can miss something diagnostically in terms of glaucoma. In my experience so far, between myself and my colleague that I will work the most with, we get maybe one, maybe two steps different. It's never been critical difference between the way I measure and the way she measures, and she's definitely more heavy-handed than I am, and she usually will get a slight variation to mine. I tend to get the exact same as the doctor gets in the Goldman in her room. So look, it's not at all a critique. Everyone's got their own technique and their own approach, and everything is valid. We just have to take that into account. You know, when different people measure, that you can always take into account their heavy-handedness or their technique or whatever it is. So you just always keep in mind the accuracy of the measurement. Anyway, back to teaching. So I love teaching. I think I was a tutor in university. I love to teach, and I get a little bit overexcited, I'll admit that. And at one stage of our time together, I said, oh look, we discussed the fact that she's unfamiliar with Perkins. or Goldman for that matter, and has only ever used the automated tools, which by the way are fine. I have absolutely no issue with the automated tools. I just am a huge believer of if there's an opportunity to learn, why not? And also we have this tool, so you need to know how to use it. So the automated tools are the eye care, and we now have one in the clinic as well for like a secondary thing, or for people who are allergic to the drops and things that are needed for the primary machine, which is our Perkins. You know, and sometimes you don't want to put drops in someone, but you still want a measurement, or you want something that's a bit more disposable. There's always good reasons for machines being around, and there's benefits to any new technique. Even if the accuracy does go down a little bit, just a little bit, not a lot. So yeah, so she's been very good on that one and been quite comfortable with that one, and almost didn't want to learn the new one. So who was the guinea pig for teaching on? Me. So the problem with a lot of these devices, these older devices, the more accurate ones, is you actually have a little viewfinder that you have to look through. And when you set something up, let's say on an eyeball, and then you go to look, there's a very good chance you might move your hand as you do it. And that's exactly what happened to this poor girl. So every time she went to look through the viewfinder, she would just slide the machine across the eye. Now, the cornea is anesthetized. You can't feel that sliding happen, but I could see the light moving around, which meant the machine was moving around. Anyway, at some stage, one of those movements actually did scuff the surface of my cornea, which is not a big deal. It's excruciating, but it's not a big deal. Like, the pain is ridiculous, but it's not the end of the world. And I treated it as such. Went, oh well, you know, my eye's obviously red. It looks sore. It was awful. It was watering a lot. Obviously, it was quite painful. It was extremely red, which has got the attention of my poor practice manager, who was really stressed about. I find this whole thing hilarious, but she was very stressed about how painful it looked, and it was painful. I mean, I can't say that it wasn't painful. It was painful. It feels a little bit like when you lift a nail, you know, that sort of really sharp, awful pain of like when your nail bed is stressed. It's that sort of pain, and it's actually quite accurate to compare it to the nail bed, because the amount of nerve endings we have on our corneal surface is very similar to that underneath the nail bed, except there's more on the cornea. So yeah, that was what it was, and it was a bit of a drama. It was really funny to me because I put myself into that situation, so I volunteered. So you know, you can't be angry with that, but she did learn. That's the good thing. She did have, after that, a few goes on some patients with my literally standing right over her, and she was able to see some readings that I measured up and just showed her. So we're getting progress. So it's really good. I'm really happy with, you know, where the training ended up for the day, but it was with the sacrifice of my cornea. Now, going on the reaction of my practice manager, I'm probably guessing that you guys are all have the same question as what she had, is how are you so calm? Are you going to be all right? How can, you know, why are you laughing if it's so sore? First of all, my trauma response is to laugh. So when I'm in pain, I do tend to giggle, because I always do think it's silly that I found myself in the position where I'm in pain. You know, especially that it was a silly injury. It was, you know, and the other thing is I was really confident that it would go away in 24 hours, because that's how long it takes for us to grow a new surface of the cornea. The cornea regenerates fully, the surface of the cornea, I should say, regenerates fully in 48 hours, sometimes quicker. And I know that mine has no problem regenerating. I've had enough, you know, mascara wands in my eye, or, you know, allergies and things like that in my eye to know how quickly my eye heals. And I knew it just needed one night's sleep and I'd be fine the next day. So I was really calm about it. I knew that it was, you know, temporary. I could see. My eye was very watery, so it was blurry, but I could still see. You know, it wasn't going to stop me from driving a car. It wasn't going to stop me from working. It wasn't going to stop me from using my phone or cooking dinner or any other things I needed to do that day. So I was quite happy that, you know, it wasn't, you know, going to be changing my plans or anything like that. It wasn't really affecting me like that. It was just really uncomfortable, really painful. So what did I do? I went and got myself some Chlorzic ointment. Chlorzic is a very entry-level antibiotic. There's a million different versions of the same thing around the world. I've recently come across an antibiotic that's also antifungal, antiviral. There's some countries sell instead of Chlorzic So the full name of Clausy is chloromycetin. That's the chemical name, and it works a treat. So I took the ointment. Now the reason I chose an ointment, and I could have chosen a non-antibiotic ointment, I could have chosen just a normal benign, just gooey ointment, but we didn't have any in the clinic. It's the only thing we had on hand. So it's very, very oily and very, very thick. So it's going to protect my eyelid from re-scratching the disturbed surface of the cornea. So that was the theory there. So the idea is that when you do have any kind of change to the surface of your eye, even if it's dry eye, you don't want it to rub, because even if you have dry eye, you don't have that beautiful lubrication, natural lubrication that the eye has in the tear film. So because you don't have that protection, you want to kind of avoid the eyelid, because the eyelid is not smooth. It's full of little bumps and eyelashes and canals and whatnot that can easily be unsmooth. You want to avoid any kind of rubbing or friction. So the best way to do that is to lubricate. Now, plain old lubricant did not work. I did start with that, so I did have to up the ante with some ointment. And why not go for an antibiotic? You know, like if there was anything on the surface of that Perkins, there wasn't, because I personally sterilized it, but you know, even if there was the tiniest little scratch and the tiniest little microbe, or maybe there was something already in my eye, didn't sterilize my eye, you know, if something was going to get in and cause an infection, why risk it? Especially if it's so benign to use a Clausic treatment for one day. So then the first day I used it, basically every time my eyes started to hurt or water, I just squeezed a little bit in. Not so much that I couldn't see, but enough to relieve the sort of the grittiness that I was feeling and that pain I was feeling. On the next day I really didn't need it, but I continued to just pop it in just a couple of times, anytime I got uncomfortable, just so I wouldn't re-scratch it. The other ointments that I would recommend is, we've got here polygels, we've got here Polyvisc even, which is a bit of a runnier gel, which I really like. You've got Gentile gel is a really good thick oily one, which is great. And Vitapos is one of my personal favorites. I recommend it quite frequently to patients with severe dry eye or severe anterior surface issues, or even just toxicity from drops, people who are on drop treatments and their eye is getting irritated by that. I do recommend an ointment overnight just to help the eye regenerate a little bit better without, you know, all the eye movements that happen overnight re-scratching or re-disturbing the surface. There's lots of options in the Australian market, and I'm sure that there are similar things overseas, especially that I'm pretty sure none of the ones that I've at least mentioned just now are actually strictly Australian. Most of them would be made by international companies or imported into Australia. So for sure there's some version, maybe under a different name, available in your country. I'm sure of it, or some version of. This is, you know, ophthalmology 101. This is not anything serious. The truth is, though, is it's because I knew it wasn't a deep scratch. If it was a very, very deep scratch, then we would need to treat the cornea. So if in 48 hours you're not getting relief, or if your vision has been severely affected in that it's not just blurry, you're actually not able to see, I would get an ophthalmologist to just take off the scratch. There's a very special file. I know it sounds horrible to have your eye filed, but it's honestly not bad at all. They just take off the bad cells or the damaged cells, which means that your eyelid doesn't do it. So can you imagine having to blink away all those horrible cells, and it would hurt every time you blinked, every time your eye moved? This way a doctor can just clean it all off, take away the scratched or disturbed cells, just by a very, very gentle filing or gentle removal. You know, it can even be done with things as crude as a cotton bud. I don't recommend that, but it can be done, or a needle or something. But I just don't recommend that. There are special burrs, they're called, that just really, really, really lightly, one cell layer at a time type of thing, clean away disturbed cells, and then the eye has every opportunity. Again, it would take 24 hours to regenerate, because you know, then there's nothing interfering with that regeneration. So in my case, I knew it wasn't anything big deal because I knew the tool she was using. I knew the sterility of the tool she was using. I knew that she didn't, you know, intentionally scratch my eyes. It was a very light movement that she didn't even realize she made. Didn't even tell her. Everybody else knew, but I didn't want her to be discouraged from trying again. So I didn't even tell her that, you know, she could see my eye was red. Like, oh, don't worry, it's a reaction to the drops. You know, like, trying to really encourage her to try again, to learn, and to not make these mistakes on actual real patients, and things like that. So Good news is literally the next day I was fine. It was less than 24 hours for the eye to recover, and I do attest that to the fact that I put a lot of lubricant and a lot of ointment in. At night I filled the eye. It was just like a big white mess with ointment, because I knew that rapid eye movement or even just squashing your head into the pillow can also cause an abrasion, and I couldn't afford a further abrasion on an already disturbed surface. That would be risk for infection for sure. So you got the antibiotic there as a barrier, but also as a antibiotic, and also as the ointment. So as the beautiful, gooey, oily regenerator lubricant in this instance. So definitely do recommend, if you have a little scratch or a little disturbance on the eye will definitely water, because that's the eye's response. It's trying to lubricate and flush out anything that has gotten in. It doesn't know what happened, it just knows that it's sore. So it just cries and cries and cries. Lubricate like mad. Use any lubricant you have on hand. My colleague did suggest saline just to flush the eye, which would have been a good idea, but I did know for sure that it was a scratch because I saw her do it. So I was confident I didn't need to flush anything out. But definitely, if you're not sure about what has disturbed your surface, it does not hurt to flush with saline. Good old saline bath never made things worse, that's for sure. But it was more the fact that because I was crying so much already, it didn't sort of make sense to me that I knew it was a scratch. I was already tearing up so much that I felt like everything had been flushed. It was more a matter of just helping that wound heal. So that's my little adventure that I had. And to quote the doctor I was working with that day, we were working with that day, "You're mad," for volunteering your eye to a student. I said, well, you got to learn, and the only way I can teach her, I'm not going to sacrifice poor, unknowing patients, and that's unprofessional. So that meant that I was going to be the one who teaches her, and I will continue to teach her, and I'll continue to volunteer my eye. I will probably warn her, and in fact, that was one of the things we went over, that we don't move our hands once we're on the actual eye. If you need to move, take your hand off first. It's the same thing as learning to drive. You know, when you first, do a head check when you're driving, the first thing you do is the steering wheel follows you. It's just about learning your hand-eye coordination and a new skill, and I'm sure she'll be fine. Okay, my lovelies, I hope you enjoyed my little story today. I've planned a whole list of interesting eye things coming up. We'll definitely do some Tichel tutorials very soon together, because it's been a little while since we've done anything with some Tichels. Definitely more stories to come. I just have a feeling that this is going to be a year full of stories. And I thought it would be fun to share with you my experience that I can also be a patient too, and how that felt, and how I reacted to it, because a lot of the time the biggest issue is the panic. So to see what's coming up this year, and it's a jam-filled year, I definitely recommend you subscribe now. Make sure you don't miss a thing, and this is just an easy way to follow along and see other videos and other content and other informative things that I've spoken about in the past. There's a lot of videos there, and definitely not to miss out on anything in the future. And then of course there is Instagram. Always beautiful photos going up on Instagram, definitely lots of cute puppies and pictures of the kids and bits and pieces from our extremely full life. I highly recommend jumping on there. It's not too crazy. I'm not one of those crazy posters that do something every day, by far not. But when there is a post, I make sure that it's something worth sharing, and something particularly cute. And also it's a way for me to inform you about a new video going up. So definitely head over to Insta and follow there. Wherever you are around the world, my lovelies, I hope you're having a tremendous day. I hope you're staying safe and you're not scratching your eyeballs like I am. And I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.